Welcome to the Explainer. You know, sometimes history isn't just forgotten, it's deliberately buried. Today, we're digging up a shocking story, one that was systematically erased from our textbooks and our memories. So, let's start our story in a place you might think you know, maybe you've even been there. We're talking about the Bronx Zoo in New York.
And the year? It's 1906. Think about that time, the turn of the 20th century. We usually picture it as this era of incredible progress, right? A time of invention and innovation. So at this bustling modern zoo, what do you think was the most popular attraction? I can tell you it wasn't a lion or a tiger or a bear. Nope, not even close. It was a man, a human being, exhibited inside the primate house, right alongside an orangutan. His name was Ota Benga. He was a young man from the Congo, captured during the horrors of colonial violence, sold to a businessman and shipped to America, only to be put on display. And his heartbreaking story, well, it's the key that unlocks a much larger, much darker chapter of our history. Okay, so you have to wonder, right? Was this just some horrific one-time event, a terrible mistake from a less enlightened time that we've since moved past? Well, the answer is a hard no. And it's shocking. What happened to Ota Benga wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a massive, incredibly profitable global industry that we now call human zoos. And look, this wasn't some weird fringe thing happening in the shadows. The timeline makes it crystal clear. This started as a business model back in the 1870s and just exploded. It became a mainstream spectacle, hitting its absolute peak right around the time Ota Benga was in that cage. And when I say mainstream, I mean the scale was just staggering. Let's put some numbers to it. At just one of these events, the 1889 Paris Exposition, which featured what they called a Negro village, 28 million people showed up. And don't think for a second this was just a European thing. Nope. Right here in America, the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, where indigenous people were one of the main attractions, pulled in 27 million visitors. Almost the exact same number. So when you add it all up, researchers have documented well over 500 of these major exhibitions. This was a bona fide global phenomenon. It was everywhere. I mean, just look at this breakdown. This was a worldwide network of exploitation. People from Africa, Asia, the Americas, taken from their homes and put on display in huge Western cities like Paris, London, and New York. So this begs a huge question. How on earth was this justified to millions of people? How did you convince the public that it was okay to put human beings on display like animals in a zoo? Well, the official story, the public justification, was that it was all for science and education. But the reality, the actual drivers, two things: enormous profits and pure colonial propaganda. Okay, let's break that down. Myth number one, it was educational. The claim was, oh, people just want to learn about other cultures. But if you look at the actual ads and catalogs from back then, they weren't selling science. They were selling a spectacle. They were selling primitiveness, often emphasizing nudity and really harmful stereotypes. All right, what about the people themselves? Myth number two, they were volunteers, right? That they were paid and consented to be there. The truth is, that's just not what happened. The power imbalance was insane. Most were forced or tricked with contracts they couldn't possibly understand, or in some cases, literally kidnapped. And the whole disgusting enterprise was held up by this idea of scientific racism, which, by the way, has been completely and totally debunked. They use these displays as visual evidence to prove their racist theories. And what's really disturbing is that major institutions, museums, universities, lent their names and credibility to this, making it all seem legitimate. But really, if you want to know what powered this whole machine, you just have to follow the money. The profit margins were huge. We're talking 30 to 50%. This wasn't some small-time sideshow. It was a massive, incredibly lucrative business. But behind those big profits was an absolutely devastating human cost. We're talking about an estimated 15 to 30% of the people dying during an exhibition, from disease, from violence, from sheer neglect. The price of this entertainment was, for so many, their life. Okay, so this brings us to a really important question. If this was so huge, so widespread, seen by tens of millions of people, why is it not common knowledge?
why haven't most of us ever even heard the term human zoo? Well, the answer is that this history didn't just fade away, it was hidden. It was actively suppressed. First, you had the institutions themselves, the museums, the zoos. They had every reason to lock away their archives and just forget. Then you have the educational system, which focused on the big events and conveniently left out these really uncomfortable truths. And over time, the story got rewritten, softened into something like an innocent cultural exchange, which it absolutely was not. And this isn't just a history lesson. It matters right now. Understanding this hidden history is absolutely crucial. It shows you the direct roots of so much modern systemic racism. It's a terrifying example of how science and media can be twisted into tools of propaganda. And it reminds us why we have to hold our most trusted institutions accountable. The good news, though, is that the silence is finally being broken. Thanks to the tireless work of descendants, dedicated researchers, and even some of the institutions themselves who are finally confronting their own pasts, this history is coming to light. And it's forcing all of us to look at our history in a completely new way. So we want to leave you with this thought. The story of human zoos is proof, definitive proof, that history isn't always what we're told. It shows that massive, terrible truths can be systematically hidden, erased for generations. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other truths are we still not facing?